Disclaimer, compatibility is complicated, obviously, and it consists of multiple variables. And even though you might share the same personality type with someone else, you will still be, surprisingly, an individual because of your background and your genetical factors. But in this video, we are going to specifically focus on only personality type and how personality type can affect your compatibility. There are three things when it comes to compatibility. There is the resemblance relationship, there's the reciprocal relationship, and then there's the dissonance disparity, which means that you don't really have anything in common with those people. And there are people who are going to resemble you. So in the resemblance relationship, you will understand each other pretty perfectly, and you will feel connection in the ways you can just radiate on the same levels. But remember, this also means that you will see your weaknesses in them. The things that frustrate you about yourself is going to be the things that frustrate you about them. On the other hand, if you are having a reciprocal relationship, it means that, for example, for an extroverted thinking user, a reciprocal relationship would be someone who uses introverted thinking, which means that you prioritize the same things. You both are thinking about things rationally, logically, but your approach to it is different. Like, you're choosing the same tool, but you use the tool completely opposite ways. This can create a really complementary reciprocal relationship. You can truly learn from each other. You have to step out of your comfort zone to understand the other person, but at the same time, it can truly frustrate you, the fact that they never quite understand your approach to things. This kind of feeling of being misunderstood can truly create some conflicts, and in the long term can also build up hatred. Having a reciprocal means that there's also a sense of gravity. You are gravitated towards the person who can receive what you're trying to give. So an extroverted sensing user is trying to give a good experience for people around them, and an introverted sensing user will focus on their internal experience mostly. So an extrovert sensing user can truly complement the introvert sensing user, but only an introvert sensing user knows how it is to be another introverted sensing user. So your cognitive bias can either be resembling or reciprocal, or you might have them both. You might have some functions that are reciprocal and some functions that resemble each other. But then we can look at the temperaments. Here you can see a comparison of these temperaments. What, as an INTJ, you need to know is that most likely you're going to be drawn to people who are prioritized and have similar core needs that you do, which is going to be other NTs. So you're going to prefer INTJs and INTPs. As an INTJ, you are most likely also drawn to the reciprocal or the complementary approach to understanding the world and concepts, which is going to be the NFs, which is going to be NFPs and NFJs. With SJs and SPs, you're probably going to have less things in common. You might find different ways to understand each other, but your core needs are going to be pretty different, and you're going to be focusing on pretty different things. But it's not necessarily a bad thing. It just means you maybe might not develop such a strong connection with each other, but you might also not develop hatred. So let's go through the compatibility chart for INTJs. So resemblance relationship means that you have the same functions with these people. High to down is gonna be how compatible you are with them. Resemblance relationship is gonna be ENTJ, INTJ, ESFP, and ISFP. Just want to point out that extroversion and introversion are the fundamentals when it comes to the original Jung's theory about personality types. Jung called them archetypes. Am I saying that INTJs are going to prefer ENTJs over other INTJs? Yes and no, okay? Introverts most likely can create strong bonds with another introvert. Why is that? It's because introverts are seeking less for stimulation and extroverts are mostly seeking a lot of stimulation. So it's actually quite possible that extroverts are more lonely actually than, for example, an introvert, because introverts can truly create special strong bonds with people. I think an INTJ can perfectly understand another INTJ, but they they are gonna annoy the hell out of each other also. So what would really describe INTJ plus INTJ pretty well is that these INTJs are gonna love each other, or they're gonna hate each other because of how similar they are. If their passions and willpower is perfectly aligned, they will just go to the same direction and see nothing else, or they just gonna seriously hate each other. ESFP and ISFPs have also a similar stack to an INTJ, but their prioritization of these things is completely different. So what this can lead to is that they can understand each other quite well, but they also have a sense of misunderstandings. Younger INTJs probably feel gravitation towards ESFPs because ESFPs represent INTJs' weaknesses. Like, they are the outgoing, super social, always good in those social situations and perfect giving people good experiences. INTJs might aspire to be an ESFP. But if an INTJ is really looking for having stimulating discussions and intellectual stimulation, I'm not saying ESFPs couldn't do that, but I just think ESFPs would get really irritated and frustrated because INTJs would really focus on that. They would prioritize that above all the other things. This kind of approach might really frustrate ESFPs. And I'm not sure if an ESFP could even stand this kind of introverted energy that INTJs represent. I really think INTJs are one of the most introverted types, even among introverts. So that can definitely create some challenges in those relationships. Well, ISFPs are maybe more balancing for INTJ than ESFP. It's not because they're complementary, but both of them are pretty introverted, so they can really have a deep connection. They could get along pretty nicely, and I think an INTJ and ISFP relationship would be a caring one, but probably not necessarily a super deeply connecting one. So that's the resemblance relationship. So INTJs have the same cognitive functions than these four types. When we go to reciprocal, it means that these four types that are the opposite of INTJ are having the opposite kind of functions than the INTJ mainly uses. So their approaches are going to be complementary. That creates its own challenges, but it can also truly create some space for growth. First one is ENTP. Well, these two types are going to be connected intellectually. They're going to have really stimulating discussions and really interesting approaches. INTJs are going to be stimulated by ENTP's intellectual, weird approaches to things. A lot of ENTPs can come across almost like ENTJ-ish, and this is because they can be really dominating type also. They can really push their own opinions, and INTJs might find ENTPs sometimes too intense almost. They're both also really independent types, so actually one of the issues might be that the INTJ and the ENTP are just gonna have their own interests, or they can't really balance each other's interests out, and they just end up eventually going to different directions. Also, it depends how confident the ENTP is. If the ENTP is constantly seeking validation from people, the INTJ could get easily frustrated or annoyed by their clingy energy. But it really depends. I think the ENTP and the INTJ couple can have super amazing intellectual, stimulating discussions, but again, they can also have really deep lows because they work completely differently. The INTJ is going to be looking for external sources for discussion, and the ENTP is going to question everything. Also, the INTJ might be seeking a sense of loyalty that sometimes the ENTPs maybe cannot completely fulfill because of their own fluctuating personality. So there's a few things to balance with in these relationships. So the next one is going to be INTP and INTJ. Well, these relationships can be great because again, there's two introverts, so they are going to understand each other's introverted energy pretty well. INTJ is going to think INTPs are pretty stimulating to talk with, interesting people. They're both pretty intuitive, but they're systematic, they're rational, logic focused people, so they're gonna have great discussions together. INTPs are much less confrontational, and I think INTPs even seek more validation from the outside than INTJs. So they can really balance each other out, to be honest. INTJs directing independent energy might be pretty balanced out with an INTP. I think this combination is pretty good. Of course, it can also create some conflict. There might be lack of complementary approach in this, But I think this is probably one of the best combinations for INTJs for sure. Then ESFJs and ISFJs. Well, they're gonna have the complementary, the opposite approach on this. But also within the opposite approach, ISFJs and ESFJs also have completely different core needs. Their focus is completely different based on the temperaments. There's not going to be a deep connection created there. I think INTJs can make pretty good friends with SFJs, and probably INTJs really actually value the loyalty that SFJs can really give, and INTJs are gonna love also the stability that the INTJ lacks. Potential conflicts might be that INTJs might find ESFJs and ISFJs a bit boring. Maybe less with ESFJs because they're still extroverted, so they probably take the INTJ out of their like shell. But with the ISFJ, INTJs probably can get pretty bored. Maybe the lack of stimulation might be a bit of an issue. Also, INTJs might be really turned off SFJs, like these moral police perspectives. If the SFJ is always telling how to behave with people or how to take people's emotions into account and how to think about the morals, the INTJ might actually really not appreciate that. Of course, it's possible that the INTJ would appreciate that, like opposite perspective also, of course. So in the middle, we're gonna have personality types that have similar cognitive functions and separate cognitive functions. And I think the highest compatibility for an INTJ is definitely gonna be the complementary temperament, which is gonna be NF temperament. And since we're in NF temperament, it's gonna be either ENFP, ENFJ, INFJ, and ENFJ. Why ENFP on the top? I think all NF temperament might work with INTJ pretty well. I think ENFP has the opposite dominant function, which is extrovert intuition. For INTJ, it's introverted intuition. So this can be really complementary for each other. The ENFPs have pretty like optimistic and new and exciting way of looking life and possibilities in life. I think the INTJ can either really respect and kind of like this, or the INTJ gets pretty frustrated because the INTJ can be a bit sarcastic and a bit like dark humor kind of person, and introverted and just wants to be in their own bubble in some sense, and this ENFP energy might just be a bit scary for them almost. So definitely they can really complement each other perfectly. They can truly find new perspectives and truly learn from each other, but at the same time the ENFP and the INTJ might actually not like each other at all. You know, they might hate each other because they're like completely different in many ways. The INTJ might just be really like, oh my god, like ENFPs are just all over the place, they're chaotic, they're like naive, they're too idealistic, when the ENFPs thinks like INTJs are just gonna be too strict, too intense. Or maybe the ENFP just thinks an INTJ is just a cute little puppy, you know, who pretends to be harsh and cold, but actually is a puppy inside. Well, the next one for INTJ is gonna be ENFJ, INFJ, and INFP. Why are these the second is because NFs are gonna work with INTJ better than the other temperaments, so that's why they're the highest. I think NFJs like seeking for validation might be a bit of a turn off for INTJs, but this might be also complementary. The NFJs, the extroverted feeling might be really soothing for the INTJ's introverted feeling child function. Like I said previously with the ENFP, I think it's the same with other NF temperament types, because NFs tend to be a bit idealistic, a bit romantic when it comes to people, concepts, and the world. This can be either complementary or difficult for INTJ, because INTJs might get frustrated. It's like INTJs might have this low, rational, cold energy, and then the NF just has this bubbly, dramatic energy coming out. It might either clash or it might actually be complementary. I think gender again impacts on this one also a lot. I think if the INTJ is a man, he might feel that an NF woman would be pretty complementary and compatible. But if it's an INTJ woman, could probably work really well with enough man. I'm kind of curious how that would work out, so comment below if you know these kind of relationships actually. So the last we have the temperament that are the furthest from INTJ, and that's gonna be SJs and SPs. The least things in common for INTJ are going to be ESTPs and ISTPs. I'm not saying they can't work. They might be good friends, they might work together and find some some common interests that they might talk about, but they're not gonna create like or build like these super meaningful, deep connections with each other. I think that's really rare. It's the same with other SJs. I think ISTJs and INTJs can really relate to each other on a rational level and maybe even on an emotional level, but there's going to be potential for conflict. They have a lot of things that resemble each other, but then they also, in some things, they just don't understand each other at all and just frustrate each other, to be honest. INTJs are going to appreciate ISTJs' loyalty and reliability, but there's going to be potential for boringness that INTJs might think ISTJs are not stimulating enough for them, or that their way of just understanding the fundamentals are different. Well, ESTJs are a bit tricky because I don't think INTJs like have anything in common with them. They don't love each other, but they don't hate each other probably. A bit probably too tense and extroverted for an INTJ, but could be a possible friendship, let's say. Well, eventually INTJ compatibility is gonna come down to how much frustration and irritation they can take. It's not easy to be having a dominant introverted intuition function and then having a child introverted feeling functions. They can be pretty sensitive towards things, although they love to portray themselves as cold robots though. Again, INTJs are one of the most introverted types, so they might feel truly connection only with other introverted types, even though the complementary would be an extrovert. Eventually, what INTJs are truly seeking from romantic relationships? Well, INTJs really want a partner that gives them freedom. INTJs don't want to be controlled, and they don't also want partners who are too clingy or too needy in some sense, because that, again, it doesn't serve the independence that INTJs fundamentally have. INTJs also are really seeking to have stimulating discussions and conversations. So if the other person have completely different approach to things, it might be really different to have like a common language there. INTJs are going to be looking for a really open-minded partnership because they really like to try things, concepts, and try like to think through things and really have like stimulating discussions. That's why we have an ENFP in the middle, top of the list, because they're an extrovert intuition user, so their intuition is externally focused and kind of like really creative in that sense. INTJs also want partners that they can think highly of, that they think are intellectual or interesting and intelligent. And of course, these kind of characteristics can come in many forms. You know, it can be an ENFP, or it can be an ENTP, or it can be an ENTJ, or an INTP, or even an ISFJ, to be honest. So eventually, it depends on many factors how compatible you are with someone, but I think there's definitely some characteristics that are more drawn to each other than other ones. Thank you so much for watching and supporting this channel. It's really, really meaningful for me. See you in the next video.